This week's episode of the Rural Woman Podcast is brought to you by the patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast. This amazing group of individuals contribute financially to the Rural Woman Podcast to ensure the stories of women in agriculture hit your earbuds each and every week. Want to join them in supporting the stories of women in agriculture while getting access to extended episodes, patron-only episodes, and other great perks? Head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more about how you can become a patron through Patreon. Hi, I'm Katelyn Dubin, and this is the Rural Woman Podcast. I'm a first-generation farmer who married into agriculture. Born and raised in a city, I was so unfamiliar with where my food came from, but I was determined to figure it out. Through my journey into agriculture, I saw women who were strong but humble, often taking a back seat. To me, these women were leaders who deserved a seat at the table. I created the Rural Woman Podcast to share the voices of women in an industry whose stories often went untold. The rural entrepreneurs who live and breathe their work, full of grit and pride. We come here to share our stories, to be in community with each other, to be challenged and inspired, but most importantly, to be celebrated and to be heard. We may not all live, farm, ranch, or homestead the same, but we are all connected. We are rural women, and our stories are worthy of being told. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Rural Woman Podcast. Today you'll meet Kailey Hood, a born and raised Montana cowgirl, passionate rancher, and the owner of Hood's Western Adventures. Nestled in Alberton, Montana, Kailey, alongside her husband and their 2 kids, operate a diverse ranching enterprise that offers everything from guided trail rides, horseback riding lessons, and Dutch oven cooking classes to weddings, hay production, cattle raising, and even a cozy horse hotel for traveling riders. In our conversation, Kailey shares her incredible journey from navigating the challenges of her youth to becoming a successful entrepreneur deeply rooted in a ranching lifestyle. She opens up about the pivotal moments that ignited her lifelong love of horses, the realities of building a ranch business from the ground up, and the importance of community in overcoming obstacles and finding success. Kailey's story is one of resilience, determination, and a whole lot of heart. Without further ado, my friends, let's get to this week's interview with Kailey. Kailey, welcome to the Rural Woman Podcast. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I am so excited to get to know your story and hear about your life in Montana and all of the good horse things and all of the good stuff. So for our listeners who are unfamiliar with you, give us your background, tell us who you are, where you're from, and how you got your start in agriculture.
Well, my name is Kailey Hood, and my family and I own Hood's Western Adventures. We're in Alberton, Montana, which is 30 miles west of Missoula. Very small rural town. It's very similar to the town I grew up in. I tell people mostly Great Falls, because if I tell people Sims, nobody knows what I'm talking about. So I'm from the Great Falls area, and my family has a ranch over in Sun River. It's called Tail Feather Angus Ranch. They raise Black Angus. And I went to school, graduated from Sims High for Tigers. Ended up moving this way. Met my husband. My husband's from this area. He worked for the Forest Service for a while. And when I met him, he was actually working for Costco. So he kind of made a big career shift there. But he really liked working for the Forest Service and ended up leaving because his grandpa was sick and in the hospital. And at the time, he was on the trail crew doing trail maintenance, and it would take him out into the mountains for several weeks at a time. And so when his grandpa fell sick, he kind of gave up on that and came home. But he was at Costco for 15 years when I met him, and ended up realized that I kind of like the mountains a little bit better than the flatlands. So here we are over here.
That's great. I want to talk about, you growing up and growing up on a ranch. Can you share with us some of your favorite memories of growing up on your family ranch in central Montana and how that really shaped your love of horses and ranching?
It's actually quite a long story, but I didn't initially start growing up on a ranch. My mom and my stepdad always had horses growing up. We always had horses. And I ended up as a teenager kind of becoming a problem child and ended up in trouble. And yeah, don't recommend that for kids. But what ended up happening is I had met a guy in high school and I was dating him for a short while and started working for his folks. And at that time, I was currently in and out of like a juvenile detention center and kind of bouncing back and forth. And my mom didn't really know what to do with me. And so at the time, his parents had stepped in and offered to take me in. And I wish I could say it was easy and rainbows and whatnot, but it definitely was not. And so transitioning to the ranch, it was a good wake up call for me. And it was really good for me in general. And they really helped me come into myself and figure out who I really was. And just through, helping on the ranch and my dad. So, and I talk about my folks, I talk about my adopted parents, but they, really stepped in to, kind of take over. And it was great and a really good place for me to be. And so growing up there, they had horses and I had a horse and I had the greatest horse growing up. The kind of horse everybody wants their kids to have. But, we did things that, kids these days just don't do. And even my own kids, like I would take that horse bareback and we rode to the store. And back in that day, they had a hitching rail actually outside the little Sinclair gas station. And so you could ride and you could leave your horse there and go inside and get some candy and a pop or whatever and ride back home. And it was a few miles. And I had a really good friend that had lived on the other side of the plateau from our place. And we used to ride our horses up there and pretend we were camping out on the prairie with the rattlesnakes and all. And I mean, we never tied our horses to anything. I don't know what we were thinking. If our folks found out, they'd probably kill us. But, we rolled out a bedroll and spent the night up there. And God only knows why our horses didn't leave us high and dry. Maybe our horses knew better that, gosh, these kids would probably die if we leave them out here. But, and I would just hop on my horse and be gone for hours and hours, just wandering. And you get to know the neighbors really well and ask for permission. Hey, is it okay if I ride out here? And most of them guys are like, sure, as long as you leave the gate how you found it. That's always the golden rule. And don't let the cows out. And yeah, and so, I ended up staying on with them and ended up graduating high school, which wasn't easy because I had messed around a lot my first 2 years. So I made up 4 years of high school, my junior and senior year, to graduate and get my high school diploma. And I would not have been able to do that without my folks pushing me and being behind me every step of the way and letting me know I could do it. And I don't know if they really gave me much of a choice, but helped me along the way and moving over here and getting married. And especially with starting up our business, I mean, they've been right there. And so we do big Christmas events. So we just had our first one Sunday where we do Christmas on the ranch and we do horseback rides with Santa. And my dad is Santa. And so they come over. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it this year, so my husband stepped in. But normally my dad comes over every year and is our Santa Claus and rides with the kids. And my mom kind of takes care of coffee and things like that, making sure things are going well.
I love that. And these are your adoptive parents you're speaking of, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. It sounds like the ranch was probably the best thing that could have happened to you as a young kid.
Yeah, for sure. I really needed a good kick in the butt. That's for sure when I was a teenager. And I got that many times. You know, you see these memes or videos and stuff where kids talk about, oh, you know, you can't hurt my feelings because I used to work cows with my dad. Like, yep.
This could be, something that we could look into later in life. And I'm sure there are programs such as, like, for troubled youth, come make them work cows and then they will learn their lesson.
Oh, 100%. I mean, and it's, we kind of do a little bit of that. I mean, it boils over into just regular kids with their lessons and stuff, but it really makes you step outside of yourself, especially when you get into a pen with a 1,200-pound animal and suddenly it's not about you anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. You had mentioned growing up, you always had horses. Was this an initial love for you, or did you kind of have to work your way into liking horses?
Oh, no, I had always liked horses. I don't know where it started. We always had something. I remember the first horse we had that I rode was a little POA pony named Shorty, and he was an ornery turd. And I think every kid should have a pony at least once in their life because it totally it turns them into good horsemen. I tell you what. But and when my real mom had met my stepdad, he was really big into horses. So I think a lot of me learning to ride properly and stuff came from him. And my aunt as well could ride really well. And she really pushed me to ride a lot and always had horses too. And so that was actually who had taught me how to rope was my stepdad originally. He could rope quite well. And so we didn't have a lot of money growing up. So a lot of our horses were, they call them res ponies. It's usually come real cheap off the reservation. They're grade, they're not paper, they're not the best conformation, and they're cheap. A lot of the times they're not that great, and sometimes they make the best horses in the world. And so I'm a big fan. A lot of our horses we have here are just grade non-registered horses, and they're amazing. And one of them that we have is one that I got when I was a kid, and I still have her to this day. And she's a unregistered little Appaloosa Mustang that we got off the reservation, and I bought her when she was 2 months old, and she's 21 this year. So, and she's one of my top lesson horses. And so I like to tell people, sometimes in the horse industry, people get real caught up on papers and lineages, and that doesn't matter so much to me because I've come across enough horses that some of the best ones, you can't put a price tag on them and they're free. And I've ridden horses that have the best of papers and they're complete nut jobs. Like, and somebody spent thousands of dollars on that horse. And so, yeah, I like to teach people to kind of just ride the horse that they have and not worry so much about the background or where it came from or how much you spent on it. Just ride what you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to us about the transition. You had met your husband, you'd moved to the Missoula area. What was that transition like for you moving from, I guess, one small town to another?
Well, when I first moved here, my husband actually lived in Missoula. We had a little apartment and it was pretty lonely at first because I knew nobody here beside my husband. I left kind of everything behind. So it was kind of hard at first, and we got married and we had our first daughter, and she's, turning 15 this year, and go through everything that young couples do, and bought our first house, which was just a small house in Alberton. So that's when we officially moved to Alberton, and we actually lived in the town. And I should have looked it up before this, but I want to say the population's less than 1,000 within a town. It's pretty small. I think the vast majority of your population comes from outside of the city limits, if you will. But it's, one road through the town. There's a post office, 2 bars, a bookstore, a school, gas station, coffee shop. And then, we got to a point, my husband and I had both worked for an outfitter who is not too far from us now, but it was called Hole in the Wall Lodge. And my husband worked up there as a guide and a ranch hand and did all sorts of things up there. And I ended up going up there as well and worked in the kitchen and was cook, bartender, server, groundskeeper, whatever they needed, and it was such a fun place to work until it shut down. The owner had passed away and they decided to donate it to Iowa State University. So now it's a conservation camp for the college. And unfortunately, I mean, it's great. It's great for the college kids to go up there, and they do a good job of keeping the trails clear, but now it's closed down to the public, so you can't even go in there anymore. And that was actually where we ended up getting married. And so it was always a special place for us, and it's kind of a bummer now that you can just drive by it. And then I went on to work for a couple other big ranches nearby, and guest ranches is what they are. And there's just not, growing up, so much agriculture on the east side of the mountains and big ranches, and there's just not that here. And I used to be able to go get hired on to go gather cows and do brandings and sortings. I mean, like that. And they just don't do that over here. There's not the space. All the big ranches that are here are privately owned and are usually a guest ranch. And I worked for a few of those, and it was okay, but we really struggled with, you go work out there and it's owned and ran by somebody that doesn't even live here. They live in Vegas or wherever, and they just come on the weekends to play cowboy sometimes. And so you end up feel like you're running the place how you think, and then the owner would come in and, they want all their buddies loaded up with beer and taken up the mountain, and it's just chaos. And we were like, there's got to be a better way to do this, especially since we had worked for a really good outfit before. And we were just like, why not just start our own company? And at the time, we had just a handful of horses, and we were getting contacted by random people. And we were getting contacted by people who knew us and knew we rode and had horses. And they were like, hey, we got friends coming in, and we know some family coming in. They would love to ride a horse. Would you be able to take them on a ride? And so, before we officially started our business, we kind of had started our business, and we were like, why don't we just do this? And we went through, it was a process of getting to where we are now, especially, just buying the ranch and selling our home was a huge leap. And it's crazy to see how God really worked through everything for us and where we were. And before we even moved into our home, we had decided, let's do this. Let's sell our house, and we're going to move, and we're going to buy something better, and we're going to go full blown with this. And at the time, we lived in a modular in town, and we rented pasture from a friend across the river. And so our house literally sold like 2 weeks before we were going to list it. And we were frantic, like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Where are we going to live? Like, at the time, we were operating, we had just started our first official year operating out of a place just east of Alberton. And they had someone that had come in, and they were going to build this big resort, and had contacted us about doing horseback rides for this resort. And we said, sure, we could sign on as a vendor. And so we were operating out of there, and then come to find out they were subdividing the whole thing. And we were like, oh, well, this is not going to work for us. So we decided, we really needed to move and find our own place. And we were going through the process with the Forest Service of getting licensed to guide and doing all that stuff. And we ended up moving into our horse trailer for, a couple months. We had it parked at my husband's parents' house, and we were living in our horse trailer for several months with the horses. And we ended up finding the place we live in now. I was just cruising through, and our realtor, I mean, she was amazing. She is the best. And I found this place. It had been on the market for an hour. And I was like, Jamie, I want to go see this right now. And she's like, well, wait, it's just hasn't been listed. Like, I don't even think the guy's ready to show it. And I'm like, right now, Jamie, we have to go. And she's like, okay, let me call the guy. And he was a little frazzled, like, I have nothing ready. I literally today just decided to sell my house. Like, and we came out. He wasn't even home. He was out of town. And we looked at the property and I was like, we have got to make this happen. What do we do? And she was like, well, I just don't know if it's in your budget. And it really wasn't. We were so strapped, like, just to make the numbers work in itself was crazy. And there was others who threw in offers that were way higher than ours. And we were like, this is as high as we can go. And the guy who owned the property, his name's Bill. And we ended up becoming pretty good friends with Bill. But we wrote him a letter and just said, hi, this is us. We would love to buy this home. This is what we would do with it. This is what it would mean to us and our family. And then our realtor, sent it over. And she called us back, I think, a few days later. And she's like, you are not going to believe this. And I'm like, what? And she goes, Bill accepted your offer. And I was like, no way. And she's like, you want to know what he said? And I'm like, what? And he says, well, he had a couple other offers that were higher than yours. And Bill looked at those offers and then he read your letter and he read their letter. And he was like, nope, I will take their offer because I'll be damned if some out-of-stater from California buys my property. And I was like, oh, thank God, Bill. And so we ended up doing a good friendship with him. He had a lot of livestock. And so since we bought the place, and he ended up in the same situation that we did, he now all of a sudden was like, crap, I don't have any place to live. And he ended up buying bare land up in St. Ignatius and had nothing on it. And so, he did so many good things helping us out. So we were like, Bill, let's help you out. Like, what do you need? The horses, the cows, everything could stay here as long as you need to get your fence up. Like, and so we did. We ended up keeping a few of his horses and mules and cows while he got his property fenced. And we offered him our horse trailer, and which was funny because he ended up just living in his wall tent up there until he got his house built. But yeah, it was just crazy the way it worked out. And even our realtor was like, just things with the bank and stuff. And it really kind of showed us where like God had a hand in it, because our realtor was like, this deal should not have happened. I don't even know what to think. This is weird. And so we really felt like this was meant to be, and this is where we were meant to be. And we had to work really hard for it. And we were like hot dogs and ramen noodles for a long time.
Right. Well, and like you said, it was meant to be somehow. And you finding that ad an hour after it was posted, and Bill being the person that he was, right? So that's amazing. What year did you buy your ranch?
We bought it in 2020.
Okay. So, and during just a unprecedented time in the world's history anyways.
It was definitely the time to buy. It was crazy. Yeah.
So talk to me about growing the ranch and back from 2020 to where it is today.
Yeah. So, gosh, when we first started, we had, trying to think, we had 1, 2, 3. We had 3 usable horses when we first started that were bomb-proof, safe for anyone, and a mule. And then we had picked up a couple colts. Mine was that I had purchased. He was only like, 8 months old. So he was kind of just a lawn ornament for a while. And then we picked up this 2-year-old that we were leading rides on. And he's actually turned out to be a really great horse now. But so we just had a couple, and we would take, 2 to 3 people out for a ride. And that was kind of before we bought the place. And then when we bought our place, it just, crazy how our horses ended up with us. And each one of us, or one of them, has a really cool story and how we came to acquire them. And, we ended up finding just the craziest of deals. And then a lot of the people that we got horses from ended up becoming good friends with us. And, we had a couple that right off the bat, I ended up buying these 2 horses in one day, and I bought them each for $500. And one was a just old retired ranch horse, and he was huge. He's 17 hands. His name was Itty Bitty, and just the best of horses. He was such a good boy. And we bought another little mare named Pumpkin, and she was also great. And we actually bred her this last year, and so she has a baby now, and they're doing just great. Her baby's huge. He looks like a Twinkie. He's just a little fat butterball. But, and then each one, it was kind of funny how randomly I would put out an ad like, hey, this is kind of what I'm looking for. And I always like to tell people I kind of have a sense, like I can tell when I go up to a horse and I can just feel it, like how they are and how they're going to be. And so each, horse that we went to look at, we were like, yeah, this is the one. And they all came at just the right time. And we went and looked at quite a few that, my husband and I took our horse trailer and we just went across Montana and went and just responded to ad after ad. And it was kind of a nice road trip, and rode some fantastic horses, rode some not so great horses, and, came back. And so now we're at 13 now, just over the course of 4 years. And we've gotten quite a few from a ranch over in Augusta that are just, just good retired ranch horses that there's nothing really wrong with them. It's just they've sustained an injury at one point in their career, or they're getting a little older and they just cannot do 30 miles a day on the ranch. They can't be out there from sun up to sundown. They can't be dragging cows and roping, but they're certainly not done. And so we've got a few, we've got a really great horse right now. His name's Boone, who got a shoulder injury at some point, and he's not even old. He's about 12 years old, and he just couldn't handle, going in the mountains to gather cows. And so they, offered him to us, and we got him kind of fixed up, and he's doing great now. And he's also one of my top lesson horses, and he's also an amazing guest horse. And a lot of our, horses probably have a little arthritis, so they all get on a joint supplement and keep them going. And we don't do anything hardcore. We just offer 1 to 2 hour rides. And that kind of seems to be what people can handle. The 1 hour rides are certainly the most popular. I would say 90% of our guests are guests that have never been on a horse before, ever. And so that's great for them. Just being in the saddle for 1 hour, it's funny to see them come off and they're all bow-legged. And a lot of the ones that are like, we're having such a great time, let's go for 2 hours. And then they can't walk when they get off, or they, we always try to tell people, let us help you down because you're going to be sore. And you get, people that are like, oh, I'm fine, I can do it. And they go to step off and they hit the ground and they're like, I'm not fine. We're like, yeah, we know. So, it's just a great place for these horses to land, to keep them going and give them, just a nice place to keep going. And they love their job. All of our horses love their jobs, and they like the people, they love the attention, and they've got it pretty good here. They get lots of hay and they got lots of acreage out here to run around and play. And I always like to tell people too that, I don't like to call ourselves a dude ranch. I've worked for a lot of those, and a lot of them don't really take the best care of their horses. And, I feel like dude ranches get a bad rep, and I've heard some horror stories. And, we get people who will come into our place and they think that we just keep the horses tied to the hitching rail all day, that we saddle them up first thing in the morning and they stay there just waiting for somebody to show up to go for a ride. And that's just not the case. They are out there in the pasture living their best life until someone books a ride, and then they get pulled in and saddled up and they go for their ride, and they get turned back out to be their fat, happy selves at the end of the day. And they don't do multiple rides a day. We try not to, if we have to, we'll do maybe a ride in the morning, ride in the evening on some of our younger horses, but Our older horses, they don't go out twice a day. They go and they work and they've done their job. And there's a lot of people that will keep those horses saddled and tied, and they just do rides round the clock, 3 to 4 rides a day. And I just don't agree with that. And our horses get chiropractic care twice a year. We also have a body worker. We have a great body worker in our area that will come out. And then my sister also is a body worker in the Great Falls area. So when she comes to visit, she works on our horses, and we do our best to keep them feeling good because, I hate replacing horses and I want ours to last because they're great. And losing one it's not just financially hard, it's emotionally hard to lose one because you get attached and your guests get attached to them. So it's really hard to replace that, and so yeah, we try to do everything we can to keep them going and lasting and feeling good. And they got to deal with guests getting on and hanging on the side, and you'll look back sometimes and guests are leaning over on the saddle and they get tired, and and so we always make sure their backs feel good and beginning and end of the season, and they're just good to go.
It sounds like your horses get better taken care of than most humans, probably riding those horses.
Oh, absolutely. I've never been to the chiropractor. Mine go twice a year.
Right?
I've never gotten a massage.
That sounds really nice.
Right? Oh, yeah.
So besides the trail riding, what other offerings do you have at Hood's Western Adventures?
So we do the trail rides, and then we do, and even our trail rides are customizable. We've taken girls out for a birthday party, and we've packed some cake and things like champagne for them, and we set up a little picnic down by the creek, and we've done proposals out here where we took the couple out for a ride while their family stayed behind secretly and set up like proposal table for the guy, and super cute. And we do a lot of photo shoots. We've done engagement pictures. We do unicorn photo shoots. Those are a big hit with the kids. And my mom made all these super cute unicorn horns so we can customize each one per horse, which one matches the horse better, and the kids can pick out which unicorn they want to take a picture with. And we do Dutch oven cooking classes. So Dutch oven cooking is kind of something I really like to do. And I've done quite a bit of it in the past, where I've done a few women's events at the Outdoorsman Church in Missoula. And then we did some women in outdoors events at Cabela's, where we set up our Dutch oven on the sidewalk and cooked for people. And so that was something we kind of offered out here, was to do a cooking class. And we set it up like, a cook and show, and people come in and pay, and they get a 3-course meal, and they get the recipe cards for everything I cook at the end of it. And we do bread and biscuits and gravy and cobblers and chicken and kebabs and all sorts of stuff. And that's been really fun. And we've done like ladies' night. We've had, groups of women come in, and we set up big charcuterie table in the barn. And I have a friend that does wine tasting, and she'll come in and do the wine tastings. And, we'll just kind of rotate women around and take a group out for a ride down the road. And those that stay behind will sit there and eat and try some wines, and then rotate other women out. And we do kids camps in the spring, and we'll offer a couple during the winter too, where, like Martin Luther King Day, kind of a one-day camp. And I think that's kind of nice for parents, because a lot of parents, I think, struggle like, oh my gosh, they're out of school for one day. What am I going to do with my kids? And I have to work. It's Monday. So it kind of is a nice outlet for them. And they can come out and they learn how to groom, and they ride for the day and learn all about the horses. They help us feed, and we'll do some crafts and lunches and things like that for them, and have a fire, and the kids can make s'mores. And every year we do a barn dance in the fall, and that's a fun event. That's kind of our end of the season hoorah, if you will. And we have very fortunate to have some neighbors next door that are incredibly talented and musical. And so they come over each year and play during our dinner, and we serve dinner. And then kind of when they're done, we turn on the best 80s, 90s country and try and get people out there line dancing and two-stepping. And yeah, and So it's a fun time. I think that's one of our biggest events that we do besides our Christmas event that we're doing currently. And this year we have my husband's brother brews beer. And so we ended up at a bar in the barn. And he, was part of the Brewers Association, and they do competitions and stuff like that. But he ends up brewing so much that he kind of needed an outlet to put it. So we were like, put a bar in the barn and we'll just offer it, for free to our guests. And that was a huge hit with the guests over the summer. And they're actually going through the process currently to get licensed to open up their own brewery in Frenchtown. So it's kind of been good advertisement for them as well, to let people come in and sample it and be like, yeah, this is going to be a thing for them here in the future. And
very cool. What has been the community's reaction to your business opening up?
I think it's been good. There's nothing out here like us. And so, especially the kids' camps, we've had a lot of local kids that have come in and done lessons and done the camps. And we have a ton of local people that come in, and we have a lot of local people that book trail rides, which really surprised me. But yeah, especially when their family comes to visit and they're trying to figure out things to do. And they're like, oh, these people out here, that go for trail rides. Do you want to do that? And so, yeah, quite a bit with local people. And our Dutch oven classes too is mainly locals that come in for that. And same with the barn dance. And our Christmas event is definitely all local people. And as far as I know, there's nobody else that's offering horseback rides with Santa Claus.
Right. I've never heard of a horseback ride with Santa Claus.
Oh, yeah. And so, yeah, the kids get to get on the horse and they go around the arena with Santa and get to tell him what they want for Christmas. And we set up a tractor rides so kids can hop on the tractor trailer, and my father-in-law drives back and forth between the barn and the arena, and the kids ride that. And we will pack our barn full of local vendors, so it's kind of really fun to provide a space for those people to sell their stuff and just give them another outlet to get their stuff out into the community. And I think especially with our Christmas events, we draw in a lot of people from Missoula. And so a lot of these vendors are local to Mineral County. And I think it's great for them to get that exposure for all the folks from Missoula to come in and buy from them and support them and be able to help those guys out.
You can help support the stories of women in agriculture to be shared through the Rural Woman podcast on Patreon. What is Patreon? It's a membership-based platform that helps fund and support creators like me to create and produce content like this that you all love. New to the Rural Woman podcast Patreon is ad-free listening and patron-only bonus content and exclusive episodes. Learn more and join the patron gang today at patreon.com/The Rural Woman Podcast. So you had mentioned when we were talking about acquiring this ranch and kind of how competitive the market is in land acquisition in Montana, especially from people outside of Montana. But the horse industry itself can be quite competitive. So what have been some of the challenges that you've faced in your career and in growing your ranch to where it is today in terms of competitiveness?
I mean, yeah, finding this place was probably the ultimate. Land is, especially on the western side of the state, it is really, really hard to find property in Mineral County, especially in this area that we're in. It's almost unheard of. I think if you got on the housing market right now and looked, there would be nothing unless it's a multi-million-dollar something that nobody from here could afford. It's nuts because where I'm from, you go east of the mountains, you find all sorts of ranches for sale and plots and property and whatnot, but it's crazy over here. And same with the horse prices, and prices of horses over here are insanely through the roof. And, if you go just outside, I mean, the majority of our horses we have come from Great Falls area or farther east. And we only have a handful of them that have actually been local. And even if you go, west and you go to Idaho or Washington, it's crazy how much cheaper they are. And I know we have a friend who does outfitting, and he goes, east, like Michigan or Minnesota, somewhere over there, and buys all his horses because of how cheap they are. And, it's crazy to think that the cost of him driving all the way over there and picking up 4 to 5 head of horses to bring back is cheaper than buying one horse here locally. And I don't really know why that is. I like to think it's because of, you do get a lot of out-of-staters that come over here and they want to live the Western life and they want a horse and they don't know. And so, I think it's kind of gotten a problem of people selling horses for top dollar that really aren't worth top dollar. And people don't know any better and they buy it anyway. So then because so-and-so down the road sold their horse for that, they think they can sell their horse for that. And it kind of just has this domino effect. And it's kind of sad, really, because, you end up with a lot of horses that will go through the sale ring. And that's a lot of what we try to avoid. I know a vast majority of the ones we have gotten were set to go to the sale yard or the auction yard. And we kind of have come in just at the right time before that happened to pick them up. And a lot of those horses that are going to go through the sales, that might have a bump on their knee, or they obviously are a little stiff in the hind end or something, people aren't going to buy that. And they end up on a slaughter truck going to Mexico. And a lot of our horses that we've picked up just needed a little TLC maintenance to get back on track. We had, our one with the shoulder injury, it just needed a chiropractor adjustment and his feet trimmed right. And he was great. So a lot of ours, and we've gotten pretty good at being able to look at a horse and tell, I could patch him up with a little bit of vet care and just a little good joint supplement and whatnot. But, we also look at quite a few that horse has a major injury, and that's not no amount of MSM is going to help that horse. And so the hay has been another thing. We're super fortunate and blessed that my dad produces hay. And so over the years, we have bought all of our hay from my dad. And, it's crazy how cheap it is just on the other side of the mountains than here. It's insane. It will cost me significantly less money to purchase, 20 tons of hay from my dad and pay him to truck it here and stack it than I could ever find locally. So we go that route. And like I said, we're very fortunate. And without that, I don't know if our business would have taken off. We would have been a little bit more strapped than we were without that kind of a connection. And we've been real fortunate to build relationships with those around us and just the people that have come into our lives, especially. And we have a neighbor up the road that my husband has become really good friends with. And he is the one who gives us access to take rides out on his property. Also had my husband take over his hay operation. So now my husband does that. And now we produce half of our own hay. And, the hope is to get to the point where we're producing all of our own hay. And maybe I won't need to buy from my dad. Hopefully he doesn't hear that. I still want hay.
Keep growing hay.
Yeah, keep growing that. Just in case I have a bad year, you might have a good year. So, but yeah, it's crazy. The average price over here, and especially the last couple years, you had people over here trying to sell hay for $400 a ton, and that's just outrageous. And I think people who were trying to sell that, I hope they step in dog poop one day. It's just, no, absolutely not. And compared to, my dad who's, selling it way below that and still is making a profit and covering his costs. And so it's hard for me over here when you see people like that. And I try to help other people out with that because I'm here to tell you that you can produce it less. And if you can't, you're doing it wrong. And you got a lot of people over here that were trying to sell really crap hay and slapping a premium label on it without testing it or anything. And, I think when people realized that there were those out there getting $400 a ton for hay, they were like, oh, well, I got a field of grass. I could sell hay. And they borrowed their neighbor's swather and baler, and they went out and cut some fallow land, and, we're selling it for $15 to $18 a bale. And I was like, oh my gosh, no. And so it's just kind of the norm over here. And it just blows my mind that people are willing to pay that. And I wish they weren't. And I wish there was more options for people, because if they were able to, not support that, I think people would get a clue and not try to price gouge everybody out, because they know it's very limited in this area. And that's the tough part. But now you got a lot of people that are going in together on semi-loads of hay from Washington or over east. And I think that I've seen a lot of that this year. And I've noticed the prices come down, especially with it being a really good crop year. And so I'm kind of glad that, prices are coming down for everyone else, because it just kind of makes you mad to see people charging that for just because they can,
Well, I think the community piece comes into it, right? Like in building a strong local community and being able to be honest by saying, hey, like, this isn't worth it for me to purchase at this price, and having a collective of people being like, hey, we can find better hay somewhere else or whatever it is. But I think it really speaks to the power of community, and really in any rural area, of coming together to work together to find prices or find equipment or find whatever it is that's going to work for them.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So, Kailey, what is next for Hood's Western Adventures? What are you guys hoping to accomplish? What are some big goals, dreams?
I mean, I think the ultimate goal and dream is to be able to have our business profitable enough to where, my husband or I don't have to work a job or a part-time job, like this would support itself. And we're almost there. Like, it's at that point now where the business is supporting itself, and then everything else is kind of on us. So it would be the hope that, we get to a point, and in the summertime especially, we're crazy busy, but the wintertime can be kind of hard because we really slow down. It's nobody's booking rides in the winter, and lessons slow way down. Nobody wants to ride when it's cold. And so we do rely on our Christmas event in December, helps get us through December, January. And when we get into February, we do a couple kids camps, and that really helps us. So it's kind of just trying to be creative in ways to utilize what we have and keep going. And I'm fortunate to have some great, people who come in, and we offer, boarding for other people's horses too. So that really helps. But I've been really fortunate to have a couple gals come in that have just been great. And I've kind of brought them in as part of our team, and like, hey, I want to know what you guys think. I want to know what you guys want to see happen out here. And so they've been great at bouncing ideas. And, we've talked about doing a women's camp this summer where we have women come in, and they can park campers, they can put up tents, whatever, but it's just going to be a fun girls weekend. And, we do a couple lessons in the arena. It's going to be open for people to, if you don't have a horse, that's not a problem. We'll give you one. And if you do have a horse, bring it. We can put up and, and talked about what that would look like. And so, do a couple lessons in the arena, maybe end Sunday with a trail ride, and, do some fun things like do a wine tasting one night and campfire dinners, and maybe see if the guys next door want to come over and play music for them. And we have a really good friend that does just started her goat yoga business. So we reach out to her, and I'm like, hey, you want to come do goat yoga in the morning for these gals? And it's just, really being able to help each other out. We've got so many friends that have great other businesses around us. And we're really fortunate to be able to piggyback off of each other and help each other and really promote and boost each other, and what they're trying to do and accomplish. And so I think that would be the goal. Right now, my husband, and mainly we really just have our part-time jobs for something to do in winter and kind of keep the cash flow going. But, I work part-time at a bar up the road, a historical bar, and do some cooking, bartending up there. And I also will pop in at a farm and ranch store in Missoula. And my husband works part-time for a beekeeper that's out here. And it's all just, maybe 1-2 days a week, something. And yeah, that would be, and then, maybe one day I hope to have an indoor arena instead of an outdoor arena and all sorts of other little things. I know my husband would like to grow our cow herd. And right now we have 9 cows. So they help us enough to be able to cover our hay costs and whatnot, which is how that worked out this year with the way cattle prices are. So we were able to sell a couple calves, and that took care of the hay bill for the year. So everybody was set with food and didn't have to worry too much about that. And we have a dairy cow. Her name is Myra. She's actually set to calve like yesterday. Like, we're about ready to put her in the squeeze chute and squeeze her because this calf has been overdue for about a week. And she's just out there living life, like, whatever. And we're like, come on, we're tired of getting up every morning and checking on you. But yeah, so we milk her, and we have fresh milk all the time. And like, I make butter and cream and cheese and all the things. And so that's been really fun. Our kids really like it. And she's the sweetest cow ever. You can actually ride her. I always joke that she's more halter broke than most people's horses are. So
That's awesome. Well, those, honestly, I hope you get to hear this back and hear all of the goals and hopes that you have for your ranch. Because for somebody who said, I don't know if we have any, we certainly do. And I always love when people get to listen back and hear where they were to where they are today. And even just to hear your story of where you started 4 years ago. You've had a lot of growth, and I hope you keep growing.
yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of growth just in this year. I feel like we've linked up with, there's other, outlet. We're really in kind of this neat little central hub. Like, there's, 3-4 rafting companies just down the road from us. And so one of which we linked up with this summer to be a vendor for them and an outlet to where they could book trail rides through them with us for morning rides. And there's another great company right around the corner that we work with that recommend rides, and we put together ride and raft packages. And so I think just that alone really, took off. And there's also, a couple wedding venues out here. And so it's quite in the summertime, it's kind of a bustling little area, really. And it always strikes us as funny because, in the wintertime, there's nobody out here, and it feels like we live way off the beaten path. But in the summertime, there's vehicles, there's raft trailers, there's, vans constantly going. And then you got my truck and trailer ripping around all the time and back and forth. And so, yeah, it's been a great summer, been a great year, and good growth for us. And so I feel like the goals are getting there.
You're getting there. You're getting there. Kailey, my last question for you is, what is the most rewarding part about being a rural woman for you?
I guess being able to recognize your own strengths, just recognize how much you're capable of. And you don't really realize how much you're capable of until you're faced with it, and you just have to do it. And out here, that happens a lot. And, we're kind of in an area where getting a decent vet, it is hard. And we're very fortunate to have an amazing horse vet, and he's great. But for our cows, it's really hard to find a good cow vet out here. Again, it's not like where I grew up, where you had 20 cow vets on call, and your neighbor could come over and help you. But out here, we've never been able to get a vet out for our cows, which is crazy to me. It's so crazy to me to think of. And so my vet's been really good, my horse vet, and I will call him sometimes with questions because they are a specific horse facility, and I'll be like, hey, it's me. And, yeah, he's great about giving us advice and whatnot. And us just having to figure out how to deal with it. And, growing up, my dad knew how to pull calves and do all that. And I've seen it and I've helped do it before, but it's a whole nother thing when you're faced with it. You have to do it yourself and you've got no help and you can't get a vet online and you're out there just trying to fill your way blind and figure out what you're doing and make it work. And, same thing with getting supplies and things out here, and everything has to be hauled in. We don't have a, ranch store out here, and, the closest thing's 35, 40 miles away. So being able to plan accordingly, and with my husband and I sometimes going different directions, a lot of the times it kind of falls on me to get things done. And so it's kind of a challenge to, try and figure out how am I going to get this hay unloaded by myself? How am I going to fix this fence? How am I going to, but you just make it work and kind of dig down and realize that you can do it and you can split all this wood and stack this hay and get this horse taken care of. And so I think that's probably good. And I think it's good for our kids to see that, anything's possible, especially with, seeing their parents and what we've built out here. And they don't need any special schooling. And gosh, I think everything that they would need in life, they could learn right here. They can learn to weld out here. They learn to drive the tractor. Their dad's pretty mechanical, so the kids learn how to fix the tractor. And there's my dog. So, they learn what they're capable of as well out here. And I think that's just a really good thing for them to see.
Absolutely. Well, and you experienced it yourself, right? You learned on a ranch of all of the things that you needed to know were inside of you, right? So, Kailey, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. For the folks who would like to connect with you after the show or find out more about Hood's Western Adventures, where can they find you online?
Oh gosh, they can look up our website, Hood's Western Adventures, or we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. Yeah, all that info can be on there. And we're even on a horse hotel page because we rent our barn out for those who are traveling with their horses. So we do that as well. And I think that's what the site's called, Horse Hotel, Horse Airbnb. And so that's been kind of fun as well.
Yeah, very cool. I will link all of those in the show notes so people can find you and connect with you and maybe need a horse hotel.
Sounds great.
Thank you again for sharing your story with us. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you bet. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Rural Woman Podcast. The Rural Woman Podcast is more than just a podcast. We are a community. A huge thank you to the Rural Woman Podcast team, audio editor Max Hofer. A special thanks to our Patreon executive producers, Sarah Riedner from Happiness by the Acre. To learn how you can become a Patreon executive producer or other ways to financially support the show, head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen to the podcast to get the latest episodes directly on your playlist. And if you are loving the show, please be sure to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other platform that accepts ratings and reviews. You can connect with us on social media at The Rural Woman Podcast and with me at Wild Rose Farmer. One of the best ways you can support the show is by sharing it. Send this episode to a friend or share on your social media. Let's strengthen and amplify the voices of women in agriculture together. Until next time, my friend, keep sharing your story. Did you know that you can get this same great episode of the Rural Woman Podcast ad-free? I get it. Listening to ads during a podcast isn't always my favorite either. But in order to keep the lights and coffee pot on here at the Rural Woman Podcast Studios, they are necessary. I am so grateful to each and every one of my sponsors, but if you yourself would like to skip the ads while supporting the show, consider joining me over on Patreon. Patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast get ad-free episodes starting at Tier 5 on their podcast player of choice each week, plus some other great benefits. Find out more by heading to the link in today's show notes to learn how you can become a patron through Patreon.